Over the last year, I filmed a lot of content about wide feet and wider training shoes, and I feel like I have left my narrow-footed friends in the dark. So I wanted to put together a video covering 6 shoes that tend to work pretty well for narrow feet. Now, before I dive in, as always, like with wide feet, we need to remember that narrow can exist on a spectrum. So for this video, I tried to think about shoes that tend to fit D-width feet and lower. So medium to narrower feet, these shoes will all typically work decently well with. Now, that said too, you will want to consider what you're going with based on your needs. So I did try to include a nice wide range of shoes with different price points and different functionalities to really tackle a bunch of different asks. But that said, let's dive in to our first shoe. All right, so the first shoe that I want to cover is the PUMA Fuse 4. This is the latest, more premium cross-training shoe from Puma, designed for lifting and CrossFit. Now, where would this shoe make the most sense? I think if you are somebody who is going to the gym on a weekly basis and you're regularly doing CrossFit workouts, you also like to lift and you like to do some cross training and even some light cardio, so think like incline treadmill walking or stair stepper, this model can make a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to its pros, 3 things to like with this shoe is number 1, this model does have a nice platform for lifting, so you have a nice flared heel back here. It's going to give you additional stability, and then up here in the forefoot too, if you have a narrower foot, it does have a little bit of width to help you sway those toes, but without feeling too spacious to where you're going to be spilling over or swimming in the shoe. So it really does a good job, I think, for being dialed for lifting for that narrower foot. The second thing to like with the PUMA Fuse 4 is the upper volume. If you like a lower volume upper and you want a little bit more of a sock-like fit with your training shoe, the PUMA Fuse 4 can feel awesome. It has some TPU overlays that go from the forefoot into the midfoot that give it additional support, and also with this low profile mesh, it just really locks you down when you're training, so you can really sit into this shoe without having any issues of sliding around with the upper. The third thing to like with the shoe is its outsole. So this outsole is honestly pretty awesome on all surfaces, especially when it comes to maneuverability and just general gripability. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds right in this context. But up here in the forefoot, you have the Puma Flex construction, so it breaks in really fast, gives you a lot of maneuverability, and then you also have that Puma Grip upper. So it wraps around the heel and the midfoot here to give you additional support, and it also comes up on the toe box. So when it comes to general breakdown for daily wear, if you want to just use it as a daily driver, the outsole should do a really good job at giving you nice longevity, but also good grip. Now, 2 cons that come along with the PUMA Fuse 4, and do note, all these shoes could technically be cons for wider feet, but we're not going to talk about that in this video because it's for my narrow-footed friends. But the first con that comes along with this shoe is the drop-in midsole. So something to note with this shoe is it does not have a traditional midsole, aka a foam layer that separates the rubber outsole from the internal footbed. We have a drop-in midsole, so that is this thicker insole here slash midsole that you're going to get. This is a little bit softer, it's a little bit thicker, and drop-in midsoles can typically be very polarizing. Some folks don't mind them, some folks love them, some folks despise them. I'm typically in the party where I'm a little bit indifferent on them. They're not my favorite, but I don't necessarily despise them. However, if you are somebody that wants a shoe that has an insole that you can take out and swap for other insoles or orthotics, that would be something to consider with this shoe, because if you have a custom orthotic and you try to layer that on this, then the upper volume could definitely be problematic for your needs. The second con that comes along with the PUMA Fuse 4 is the heel construction. The heel can feel a little bit clunky, so if you need a shoe that's a little bit more runnable or a little bit more class or cardio focused, this would be a miss in my opinion. It's gonna be much more dialed for CrossFit and lifting. Now, when it comes to sizing, I would say go true to size for most individuals in the shoe, especially for my narrow and medium footed friends. The next shoe I wanna cover is the Reebok Nano Gym. Now, what is this shoe going to be best for? If you are somebody that likes to do a lot of versatile training, light lifting, you like to take classes, and you like to do short runs or just some cardio pre or post workout, that's where the Nano Gym can make a lot of sense. Now, 3 pros that come along with this shoe include number 1, the midsole has a nice blend of a light stability with versatility. So if, for example, you're training under 315 pounds with a barbell and you're doing a lot of like machine work and free weight work and you're not going crazy heavy, the midsole will be stable enough. What I like about the midsole is that it's very bouncy and it has nice flex. So up here in the forefoot, you have a lot of bounce and it tends to break in really fast. The second thing to like with the Nano Gym is the upper construction. So the upper, similar to the PUMA Fuse 4, has this more low profile sock-like fit and feel, but I also really like that the mesh breathes a little bit better in the shoe. Breathes a lot better than the PUMA Fuse 4, for example, and if you are somebody who's regularly working out in hotter settings or hotter gyms, this model can be a decent pick if you are big on breathability. And then the third thing to like with the shoe is its overall comfort. The shoe feels very good on the foot for long durations of wear. So if you traditionally like a higher drop for a shoe for walking and just standing and being on your feet all day, whether it's working retail or just being out and about, the Nano Gym can be a good option to go with. Now, two cons that come along with the Nano Gym is number one, with the splits up here in the forefoot, you can run into issues if you're walking around in rain or inclement weather, so you will want to keep that in mind. It's similar to the Nike Free Metcon models where that split in the midsole, especially through the forefoot, can be a little bit problematic in certain settings. So definitely keep that in mind if you plan to use the Nano Gym as a daily driver. The second con that comes along with the Nano Gym is if you're somebody that wants a shoe for a little bit more cardio or class-focused workouts and you like a lower drop, you'll likely want to pass on this shoe. The heel-to-toe drop sits rather high in this model and you will slightly feel pitched forward, so that is something to consider. Granted, in some class settings that can be great and it can actually feed into the mechanics you're after, but for my folks out there who purposely love flatter feeling shoes, you will want to consider that and likely pass on this model. Now, when it comes to sizing in this shoe, I think for narrow and medium width feet, true to size should be the safe call in this model. If you have an exceptionally narrow foot and a super low volume foot, you may want to go down to half size, but I think true to size will be the safe call for most folks, aka go with your normal Reebok size if you already wear Reebok shoes. The next shoe I want to cover is the New Balance Minimus TR V2. Now, this shoe is very polarizing. You either love the shoe or you don't like it. Now, where do I swing on the spectrum? I tend to be on the camp where I'm like, it's not my favorite shoe, but that's because the fit is a miss for me and I also just miss the old Minimus model, so there is a little bit of internal conflict going on there. But how would you want to use this shoe for your training? So this model is going to be best for anybody who wants a lower drop training shoe for cross training, lifting, CrossFit, and more athletic style workouts. This model blends stability and versatility pretty well together. Now, three things to like with this shoe is number one, the forefoot can be very playful for cross training and athletic workouts. So this model, unlike the other shoes, has a little bit more toe spring. Now that can be problematic for certain contexts, but when it comes to plyos or getting up onto the toes fast for any form of clean or snatch, this model does a pretty good job, and also it's not so springy to where you can't ground the toes. So for example, when I'm taking this shoe through workouts where I'm doing circuits that include things like dumbbell snatches, this model feels very easy to get up under the forefoot with, and then it's very easy to ground the forefoot when you're catching weight. Now, would I necessarily use this shoe to go max out your clean and jerk and snatch? No, you would likely want to find something that's a little bit more dialed for that. But when it comes to feeling sporty and athletic, the toe spring actually does play a nice role in that, and the forefoot feels very lively. The second thing to like with this shoe is if you're somebody who wants a more low profile feeling training shoe, this model could be a good option to go with. It has a very low silhouette. It almost reminds me of the older Nike Metcon models, so think like the 3 or 4 that has this very much like toned down athletic feel through the forefoot, midfoot, and heel. So if you want a more low profile training shoe, this can be a good option to go with. And then number 3, if you like a little bit more arch support, this can be a good option to go with. So we have a pretty aggressive taper here through the midfoot, and this medial sidewall does give you a nice layer of support, and there is no insole in this shoe, so it can be a decent option to put a custom orthotic in if you have thin orthotics. Now, two cons that come along with this shoe is number one, because there is no insole in this shoe, it can be a little bit problematic at times for sliding around in this shoe. So if you don't necessarily fill the upper and you can't get the midfoot super tight, I find that you actually can slide a little bit in this shoe and doing things like broad jumps and whatnot, so you will want to consider that. If you fill out the upper, I don't think it's going to be a problem. And you could also put a thin insole in to help give you a little bit of additional lift to really fill that upper out so you don't have issues with security there. So just food for thought there, or pro tip for anybody who's trying to finesse that, or you've already worn yours and you can't return them and you're trying to figure out what the heck to do. The second con that I have with the New Balance Minimus TR V2 is this tongue construction. I don't necessarily love it. Now, I love the idea of this lightweight tongue. It does keep that minimal feel on lock, but the issue is that because there's no gusset and it's this lightweight, stretchy, almost nylon feel, it can fold in at times, so that is definitely something that's annoying. It's not necessarily a make or break with the shoe's performance, but it's one of those little quality of life updates that I'm just like, why can't we just either gusset this or just make the tongue a little bit more sound? And then the third con that I have with this shoe is the heel construction. This heel that juts out can be a little bit annoying. Honestly, if they had just shaved this off and made it half of what it is, I feel like it would make the shoe so much stronger. This heel can be a little bit annoying, especially for any form of heel strike stuff, so definitely keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to sizing in the New Balance Minimus TR V2, true to size should be the call for most individuals. The next shoe I'm going to cover is the Nike MC Trainer 3. So who is this shoe going to be best for? If you want a shoe for lifting and cross training and doing a light amount of cardio, but then also good for a budget conscious shopper, this can be a good option to go with. You can typically find this shoe around like 70 or 80 bucks, and it does a pretty good job across the board. Now, 3 things to like with the MC Trainer 3 is number 1, the outsole grip. So with this shoe, you have a pretty aggressive lug patterning here through the forefoot and midfoot, and then you also have these splits. For a budget shoe, I found that the grip of this shoe does a really good job, especially on turf or rubber gym floors, where you're going to be doing a little bit more explosive work, multi-directional work, and lifting. It's also pretty grippy on machines. So when it comes to overall outsole grip, that is one of the perks that come along with the shoe. I also like that you have a lateral wall here to give you additional support. The second thing to like with the MC Trainer 3 is the midsole construction. So the shoe has a medium density foam that runs throughout, and it kind of comes up on the sides of the shoe, so you sit into this model. This gives this shoe a nice blend of stability and versatility. For a shoe that costs only like 70 or 80, the stability is pretty solid in this model. I have trained over 400 pounds in this shoe with trap bar deadlifts and barbell deadlifts, and it's been fine across the board. And it also has a nice spring to it, so you can run shorter distances without it feeling super overbearing or clunky like some of the older MC Trainer models could. The third thing to like with this shoe is the upper construction. It tends to breathe decently well, and it has a nice low profile feel, so it really locks that foot down. Now, do keep in mind there is no removable insole in this shoe. It does have a light adhesive, so if you do want to take that out and put your own custom orthotic in, you can, but do keep in mind as well, with that low volume upper, you will want to kind of weigh the pros and cons of doing that to make sure you're going to make this shoe fit for your needs. Now, 2 cons that come along with the MC Trainer 3 is number 1, if you want a shoe with a little bit more flexibility, you might want to go with something else in this list. So for example, the PUMA Fuse 4's forefoot will be a lot more flexible than this shoe, and then also the new Balance Minimus TR V2 will be a lot more flexible through the forefoot and midfoot than this shoe. It can feel a bit clunky at times. Another con that I have with this shoe is the lack of tongue gusset. Similar to the new Balance Minimus TR V2, the tongue can slide a bit in this shoe, and when it folds in, it can be pretty annoying. So if you like to wear this shoe, for example, for daily wear like myself and wear it looser, that can be an issue because it can start to slide laterally, and then you have to adjust and whatnot. When it comes to sizing of the MC Trainer 3, true to size should be the call for most individuals. If you currently wear Nike training shoes, go with the same size that you wear in those shoes in the MC Trainer 3. The next shoe I want to cover, and honestly, I went back and forth between this shoe and the Rapidmove 2, is the Rapidmove ADV 2 from Adidas. Now, this shoe is going to be best for anybody who wants a shoe for classes, versatile workouts, and short cardio workouts. The Rapidmove 2 can also be a great option, but that model will be a little bit more biased for lifting, and definitely check out that review if you're considering this model line, but you want something that's a little bit better for lifting. Now, with the Rapidmove ADV 2, 3 things to like with this shoe include number 1, I really like the Lightstrike Pro midsole in this model. This shoe has a nice bounce in the forefoot, and now something to note with this shoe is that because we have this torsion system here through the midfoot, you're not going to get a ton of flex through the midfoot, which is going to help with stability but limit some of your foot's ability to do its natural things. But for my folks out there who want the shoe primarily for classes or things like jump rope or short runs, that's where the midsole I think makes the most sense, and that's where I really enjoy it. I do like the torsion system when it comes to keeping you planted when doing lateral work, but that is definitely something to think about with the shoe, and I'll talk about that in my cons in just a second. But for the most part, the midsole of this model does a really good job at giving you a nice, versatile, responsive feel. The second thing to like with this shoe is its overall toe spring and heel bevel. So this model I think feels pretty seamless for short runs and for class style workouts. So for example, if you're doing workouts in a class where you're doing some light lifting and then you're getting on a treadmill and doing like 400 to 800 meter runs, this model can feel really good and feel really seamless for that. It tends to do a really good job and doesn't beat your feet up a ton in that context. So it is one of my go-tos for folks who need that more like hybrid-esque training shoe for class workouts. The third thing to like with this shoe is its upper construction around the forefoot and midfoot. So we have a booty style shoe in this model, and that can be a pro or con depending on how you look at it, but what I like about this shoe is the midfoot and the forefoot. So you have a nice level of security with this shoe with the mesh and these synthetic overlays, and then also on the lateral side here, we have midsole that comes up on the forefoot, so you can really brace in that forefoot. But I also like the adjustable lacing going to the midfoot. It helps give you additional lockdown, because with booty style shoes like this, without features like this, you can start to spill over or stretch out this upper a little bit faster. So I do think that gives the ADV2 a slightly longer runway when it comes to long-term durability. Now, a couple of cons that come along with the ADV2 is number 1, the torsion system. It can be a hit or miss feature. I like it for some things, but it does take away from a little bit of the articulation of this shoe. Now, if you like a little bit more arch support or like a little bit more of a midfoot support and stability in your training shoe, you'll like that. But for me, who likes a little bit more articulation, I find find it to be a little bit hindering with my mechanics at times, so just keep that in mind if you do decide to invest in this shoe. And then the second con that comes along with the ADV2 is that if you do buy this model, do keep in mind that it's not going to be that stable. So if you're doing a lot of heavy single leg work, or if you want a shoe that can work for machine work or heavier machine work at that and heavier free weights and then go into a class, this model will start to fall short from a stability angle. When it comes to sizing of this shoe, true to size should be the call for most individuals. The final shoe is the normal TYR CXT-2. And I know, okay, listen, if you love the TYR shoe, I'm not saying this model is exceptionally narrow, but it can be a decent option for folks who do have narrower feet, who may want to start getting into slightly wider shoes for CrossFit and lifting. Now, the CXT-2 trainer, what is this shoe gonna be best for? This model is gonna be great for CrossFit, lifting, and cross training. Think short runs, athletic style workouts, but mostly dialed for lifting and CrossFit. Now, 3 things to like with the TYR CXT-2 trainer is number 1, if you like a lot of boot support and a lot of midfoot support with your training shoes, this can be a good option to go with. And that's also why I kind of like it for narrower feet. If you constantly find that you're swimming around in your training shoes, this can be a good option to look into, because with these TPU overlays here on the lateral medial side and this thicker boot, it does give you a nice hugged lockdown feel when training. The second thing to like with this shoe is the Surge Energy Foam. If you plan to go crazy heavy with your lifting, or if you just want something that's going to be nice and dense for your strength work, this model can be a really good option to go with. It's going to give you a ton of stability, and it's not going to compress easily over time, so you're likely not going to see a ton of creasing in this model even after your heaviest strength days. The third thing to like with the TYR CXT-2 is the overall durability. The shoe tends to do a pretty good job at standing the test of time for most workouts. Now, there have been some one-off cases here and there, but for the most part, all of my CXT-2s have lasted a while, and that is from abrasion or any form of scraping on this model. So for the average gym goer or for the beginner or intermediate CrossFit athlete, this model should do a pretty good job for your needs. Now, 2 cons that come along with the CXT-2 is number 1, it's not going to be your most runnable cross-training shoe on the market. So if you want something that's a bit more friendly for short warm-up or post-workout runs, or even doing a little bit more cardio with classes and whatnot, you'll want to pass on the CXT-2 in my opinion. And then number 2, it can feel a little bit dense through the midfoot. So if you want more articulation, this model might not be your best bet, but I will say give it a couple weeks to break it in, and it should actually give you more flexibility as you go. So don't necessarily give up on it right away if you feel like it could be flexible enough and it's just kind of on that cusp for your needs. When it comes to sizing the TYR CXT-2, for the normal version, go true to size if you have a narrow to medium foot width. That should work for your needs. All right, y'all, that wraps up this video covering some of my favorite training shoes for narrower feet. Now, I have definitely missed some options up here. So if you have options that you love and you have a narrower foot, share them in the comments below, and also share how wide your foot is and how you like to use your shoes. I would love for this video to kind of serve as a jumping off point or as a guide where the community can come together and share a bunch of ideas with one another. But all that said, if you have additional questions on any of the shoes featured in this video, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.